Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our library's monthly program from the National Park Service. Tonight's program is all about sharks. My name is Tara Moran. I'm a librarian at the Mastic Merchant Shirley Community Library, and I'm happy to introduce you to tonight's speaker, Roxana Saravia, Park Ranger within Fire Island National Seashore. If you have any questions throughout the program, please enter them in the chat box or ask as we go. And Roxana, if you're ready, please tell us all about sharks.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm Ranger Roxana with Fire Island National Seashore, and today we're going to be talking all about sharks. Now, shark skates are all classified under elasmobranchs. That means that they're species of fish that have a cartilaginous skeleton. There are over 600 species of sharks and growing. These cartilaginous fish have 5 to 7 gill slits that filter ocean water through them so that they can absorb oxygen from the water. So elasmobranchi is a subclass of shark species that includes sharks, skates, and rays. They can vary in size from a foot in length to over 40 feet, which includes the largest species of shark in the ocean, which is the whale shark. Now, I do have a few pictures of sharks. I have a white shark on the bottom. I have a cow nose ray and a little skate. And everything pictured here can be found locally on Long Island and Fire Island. And sharks also have highly developed sensory systems which help them survive out in their environments. Now, we're going to go over shark anatomy a little bit. They look very similar to a fish with a few key differences. The two pictures on the bottom are what shark scales look like. Shark scales are a bit different from your fish scales. They're a lot tougher and they're classified as a placoid scale. And the type of scales that sharks have are called dermal denticles. And then just based on this picture, you can also see that they have a few similarities. They have dorsal fins, caudal fins, pectoral fins, as well as gill slits. And another difference is that a lot of shark species have a spiracle, which is kind of right next to the eye. And fish don't have that. Now, sharks have very highly developed sensory systems. On the left, we have what are called the ampullae of Lorenzini. In the picture, they are the really tiny. I'm going to turn on my pointer really quick just so I could point them out. But if you look on the underside of the shark, there's a ton of little dots, and those are our sensory organs. Now, another sensory organ that a shark has is the lateral line. Not all lateral lines can be seen really well. This picture is pretty defined. And that helps the shark sense movement in the water. So that's really important for trying to get some dinner. And then some sharks even glow in the dark. That's more of a deep sea shark adaptation. They're covered in photophores, which are light producing organs. And they tend to have like a blue or green bioluminescence. Now, we also have rays and skates classified under elasmobranchi. I have a comparison between a stingray and a skate. They have a lot of similar body parts, but the key difference, I would say, would be to look at the tail. A skate has a stockier tail as opposed to a stingray. Now, a skate's tail is more slender and whip-like, and then some stingrays do have a stinging spine on them, and which skates don't have. And another key difference is that skates reproduce by laying eggs. Now, how do sharks reproduce? They do so in a variety of ways. One of the main ways is giving birth to live sharks, and that's called viviparity. Now, there are many species of shark that give birth to baby sharks, and they're called pups. They only have a few pups at a time, and they usually abandon them after birth. Baby sharks have an instinct to know how to survive immediately after they're born. It's that fight or flight instinct. And the mother shark goes on about her business and doesn't really give them a second thought when she's, left them. Now, another way that sharks reproduce is by laying eggs. And I have a picture of a shark egg case right here on the top right. You can see the shark swimming in the egg, which is really neat. I've been to a few aquariums before where they will have shark eggs on display with a little light shining through them, and you can see it swimming in there. And now in this picture, you can also see the egg yolk. And as the shark develops, it does get a lot smaller and the shark itself grows, which is really cool if you have the opportunity to observe that. So the sharks that do lay eggs, they do so in really well hidden protected areas. They tend to be towards the sea floor in bunches. And they are also commonly referred to as mermaid's purses. And then more so recently, I have had children tell me that they think they look like little masks, which is cute. But these egg cases make it really difficult for predators to get inside them because they're so difficult to find. And if they do find them, they're not going to be able to know how to get into them. And sharks don't really have many predators, so it's important to protect them while they're small because that's when they're the most vulnerable. And then another method, the third method, is not so common, but it has been documented within sharks in captivity. There was like a story of a shark in an aquarium that it was all female sharks in the aquarium, and out of nowhere she was pregnant, and then they realized, oh, okay, like sharks are capable of asexual reproduction. It's not so common because out in the wild, giving birth or laying eggs are the most ideal circumstances, but when you're in captivity you don't really have many means to reproduce, so they've evolved to be able to do that, which is really interesting. And I don't really know if they're able to do it in the wild, but they have seen cases of it in captivity. Now we're going to talk a little bit about egg case anatomy. Rays, sharks, and skates all have the ability to lay eggs, and they all look different. So the pictures on the right are all different types of egg cases. I know the ones in the middle are all skate egg cases, whereas the ones on the right are all for sharks and rays. And you can identify them by looking at the proximal and the distal end, which is like the top and the bottom. The little, they look like horns almost. They'll all have a different type of appearance based on the species. And then for some species, they'll even have like little curly tendrils off the side. And that's another way to be able to identify them. I know that we have skates and dogfish on Long Island and Fire Island, which are able to lay these egg cases. And each egg case only has one embryo or one animal in it. And once it hatches, it'll swim out of it into the bay whenever it's ready. And there are really cool YouTube videos as well if you're interested in seeing what that looks like. It kind of reminds me of a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, because the skates and the rays, it almost looks like they're like opening up their wings and swimming out of the egg case, which is really neat and not something that I've ever had the chance to see in the wild. So it's cool to see it in video. Now, sharks can live in a variety of different ecosystems. They can live in Arctic waters, the open ocean, mangroves, and kelp forests. And I did include images of all of these. Now, the picture on the left is a baby lemon shark in a mangrove. I think it's really cute. It's a nice picture. And then the top picture in the middle is a Greenland shark, and that's a shark that's found in Arctic waters. The shark on the bottom, that's an open ocean shark. I don't know what species is in this picture, but I know that it's like native to Long Island. And then the last picture on the right is a shark in a kelp forest. And I think this picture is honestly really beautiful. And it just shows you, I don't know. I feel like we always think of sharks in kind of scary light. So it's really nice to see these really pretty pictures of them in their own environments. And each of these ecosystems have their own advantage. For example, with the mangroves, they provide protection for those small, younger sharks. And then I know that even stingrays, shovel-nosed rays, and blacktip sharks can be found in mangroves as well. And then with the open ocean and Arctic Ocean, they tend to be more productive, meaning that there's more food available for them, which is why they have an advantage there. And same with kelp forests, there tend to be a lot of smaller fish there, so there's a lot of food present for the shark. Now, we do have a variety of sharks on Long Island. We have basking sharks, blue sharks, common thresher sharks, dusky sharks, sand tiger sharks, sandbar sharks, short fin mako sharks, smooth hammerhead sharks, white sharks, smooth dogfish, and spiny dogfish. And I did get all of this information from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They do have a page with a lot more information about these sharks, such as how long they live, what type of environments they prefer, and whether or not you're able to fish for some of these species. And then I did also obtain all of these pictures from the DEC website as well. I know we have a white shark, a smooth hammerhead, and a sandbar shark in these pictures. And it's the great white on top, the sandbar shark in the middle, and the hammerhead on the bottom. Now, why are sharks important? So sharks are what is considered a keystone species. A keystone species is something that if for some reason it was taken out of the environment, you would see drastic changes. It's almost like an essential part to the ecosystem that it's in. So sharks are able to balance food webs because they are a predator at the top of the food chain. When sharks are present, they prevent an overabundance of other fish species. And that's mainly due to hunting. And sharks also keep prey population healthy. So some sharks are opportunistic, meaning that they like to go for the fish that are really old or sick and weak. And that's also a really good thing in a sense, because if they're able to take out those, the weaker and sick fish, that kind of gives an opportunity for the fish that are considered healthier or better or more fit to be able to reproduce. So in a sense, they do help keep the population healthy because they're getting rid of the fish or other creatures that aren't doing so well. And then another reason why sharks are so important is that they keep vital habitats healthy. Without a predator, herbivores such as sea turtles or dugongs, they would stick to one area and they would, feed. If there's nothing there that's going to run you out of your environment and you have all the food that you could desire, you'd like to hang around and, keep doing your thing where you are. There's no point in moving. And that might seem like a really good thing for the species in question, but it can be really harmful to the environment because then that animal is going to stay there and just keep on grazing. And that could potentially lead to overgrazing of eelgrass beds. And that's a really important habitat for a lot of species. It can also lead to overgrazing in coral reefs if, you were talking about shark species and coral reefs, but we do have a lot of eelgrass here on Long Island, so I figured that one would be a really good example. And eelgrass beds are, they're important for a lot of reasons. They're food, and they can also provide shelter for a variety of smaller fish species and juvenile fish species as well, and crabs. Now, sharks face a lot of threats as well. It's hard to think about sharks having threats because you think of them as this really big predator and they're on top of the food chain. But, you know, there are a lot of different impacts a lot of different things that can impact their species abundance. Now, on the left side, I have a list of human impacts. Overfishing and bycatch are really harming shark populations. When I mean bycatch, I'm talking about like commercial fisheries or recreational fisheries. Sometimes sharks will end up getting tangled up into a net. There are regulations in place to try to reduce the amount of bycatch that commercial and recreational fisheries experience, but it's not, 100% effective, and you still do have, mistakes every now and then. And I do have a picture on the left of a hammerhead shark caught in a fishing net. And the really sad thing about that is that even if they release the shark afterwards, its chances of survival have greatly increased because of all of the stress and potential injury that it went under. And then another human impact is shark finning. Shark fin soup is really popular in some countries, and shark finning has been, there have been cases of shark finning like in the United States as well. And I know this middle picture is a little gruesome, but it is an example of what shark finning is like and what it looks like. And now another way in which humans can impact shark species is through interaction and recreation. By recreation, I have a broad list of things under that, such as fishing recreationally. It could get tangled up in your line, and even if you were to release the shark again, it's already been through a lot of stress, and it could potentially have gotten injured in some fishing line, which, is never fun. And again, it could make it susceptible to infection. And then boating is also another potential threat. Sharks are out in the water where we tend to be boating, so boat strike is possible, although not very common. And then another human impact is habitat loss. We are building, so we are, building up on coast, which is leading to the loss of a lot of important habitats. And we are also boating, which in a sense is inhabiting the place where they live. So, we're really hurting them in that sense. And that kind of ties in with that last bullet, pollution and marine debris. When the waters aren't as clean, that's where the sharks live. So we're really hurting them in that sense. And now biological limitations, this is more so to do with like sharks and their life history. They are a very slow growing species and they have late maturity. Most shark species don't reach maturity until at least 20 years of age. And for example, a great white shark matures anywhere between 26 to 33 years of age, which is honestly a really long time. And they are also, they have a long gestation period. Gestation can be anywhere from 9 months to 2 years long, which again is a really long time when you think about the fact that it's going to take 20 to 30 years for this shark to be able to have, offspring. And then it's going to take about 1 to 2 years for it to be, fully developed and for it to have that baby. So it really, it puts a damper on things because even if you were to take away the human impact, it would take the species a while to be able to play catch up in a sense, because it just takes so long for them to be able to develop. And most sharks do only have like 1 to 2 young at a time. especially for live births. They really only have one at a time. And then with the eggs, it just depends on whether or not the eggs are able to develop and make it. Now, there are a lot of shark conservation efforts in place. NOAA Fisheries has a fisheries management plan, which encompasses sharks. Within that, it includes highly migratory species, and that's species that travel long distances across domestic and international waters. There are a variety of shark species that do migrate from north to south or vice versa. And there are also certain species of shark that are listed as endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act. I believe like 3 of our native species are listed under the Endangered Species Act. And there is also the Shark Conservation Act of 2010. And that made it so that sharks were brought to shore with their fins naturally attached. So in the past, there was this practice of removing sharks, like a shark fin, before you brought it up onto land to get, counted and observed. So a way that people tried to get around it is that they would kind of, temporarily attach these fins onto the shark so that they could kind of pass inspection in a sense. And it was happening a lot, so they had to make claws essentially so that they would put a stop to it. And that includes all sharks except for smooth dogfish. Now, sharks are also protected under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. That's also referred to CITES for short. And that increased protection for commercially exploited sharks and rays. And some examples of sharks that we have here on Long Island and Fire Island that are protected under CITES are hammerhead sharks, basking sharks, and thresher sharks. And there are a few other ones as well. And another way in which sharks are trying to be protected are through the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. And that is a coastwide management of sharks in state waters. And New York is encompassed within that. And then I obtained this from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation website. It is a flyer that they have, and it tells you which shark species are prohibited in New York. So you have a sandbar shark, a dusky shark, and a sand tiger shark. And I included this picture also because it's important for us to know what we can or can't take from our otter, but it also has a number on here. It's the 1844 number, which you could report a violation to toll free, and it is also confidential. Like they're not going to let the individual know that you were the one that called. But we do have like DEC police. When they get these reports, they will go out and investigate, and there is typically a fine associated with the possession of these sharks. And if you do catch prohibited shark species, it does tell you to return the shark to the water immediately and to not injure the shark. And if you want to know a little bit about the saltwater fishing regulations, there is also like a link included in this that you could visit, and it would go a little more in depth about what you can or can't take from our local waters. Now, I bet you're wondering what you can do to conserve sharks. You can educate yourself and your friends and family about sharks. I did include some resources underneath of organizations or universities that are currently doing shark research within New York State. Stony Brook University has quite a few graduate students who are looking into shark research. And fun fact, one of them was actually featured on Shark Week in July, which is really cool to see, students in the local area being able to share their work worldwide. I also have South Fork Natural History Museum and the Wildlife Conservation Society, who have a bit more information about shark research in our area. And these are all pretty accessible, especially with the Stony Brook University website. If you were to visit it, and try to learn more about sharks, it is put into simple words and it's not so jargony and science heavy. So it is something that, your everyday general person could, read up on and understand. And another way in which you could help sharks is to make more sustainable seafood choices. Commercial fishing tends to have a lot of negative impacts. And like, for example, commercial fishing, the bycatch is a really big problem. So is overfishing. And when you consume seafood, you are also, in a sense, consuming what a shark eats as well. So fishing in general has quite a few ties and impacts into shark survival. And now my bullet got a little messed up there, but the second bullet would be to avoid shark products. And underneath that, I listed a few things. So jewelry, quite a few jewelry is made with shark teeth, which in a sense is a shark product. Cosmetics, supplements, lotion, and facial cleansers. Believe it or not, a lot of them can be made with shark byproducts such as oils. Shark liver oil, or squalene, is a compound found in a lot of cosmetics or even like fish oil supplements. There is, I believe it's called squalene. It's very, very similar to shark liver oil, but it comes from plants. So that is now being used in place of shark liver oil to kind of, lessen the impact of things. But some of the everyday things that you're using might have shark byproducts in them, and I bet you had no idea. I honestly didn't know until I started looking in it as well, which really blew my mind. Because in my mind, I didn't realize that I was, consuming and using these products. So it's really interesting what you can learn when you start to pay attention to labels on things, even when it's not food related. Checking labels on a lot is pretty important. And there are even more items that do contain shark byproducts, but I just didn't list them all. And then my last bullet would be to become involved in a citizen science project. And the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation does have their own project going on. They call it Sharkspotter. I did include the QR code on the right, but you can also find this on their website. If you type in basically this bullet, if you were to type in New York State DEC Sharkspotter, this would come up and you would be able to click on it from your phone as well if you're not able to use the QR code. But when you click on this, it brings you to like a form that you would fill out, and it asks you a little bit of information like your name and your age, and then you answer questions about the shark species that you saw, how big it was, if you were able to, take a rough estimate, location, such as where you saw the shark, GPS coordinates, if you're able to provide that. I believe you can even use like your iPhone GPS, or if you have a picture, sometimes it'll take the GPS information from the picture itself. And if possible, if you're able to collect the water temperature or the water depth, that might be like, if you're on a boat, you might be able to get that information from the radar or sonar on your boat. And then it just asks you for the date and time of observation and any pictures if possible. And it's a really cool way to contribute to shark research in your local area. You don't necessarily have to be a scientist to go out there and collect information about sharks and do your part. And I'm a really big fan of like citizen science, community science, because I feel like when you go out and actively participate in something, you're invested at that point, like you played your part and you're going to be curious to see where it goes. And the Sharkspotter program is also all year long. So it doesn't matter if it's spring or winter. When you see a shark, you can go onto this form and fill out your information. And it does also ask you if you're willing to share your observation with the public, because a really cool thing about this survey is that it goes into an ArcGIS database, which is a geographic information systems database. It's almost like a map. And so there is a map where you can go and kind of see what other people have observed. So it's cool. I think it's neat to be involved. And if you're interested, you can learn more on the website on the bottom. It's newyork.gov/sharks. And you can also share this with your friends or family. Like if you have someone you think might be really interested in this, it's for the public, it's for everybody to use. So you're more than welcome to let everybody else know about it. All right. And then another thing is to be cautious, not fearful. I find that a lot of the bad rep that sharks get tends to be because of movies such as Jaws. These movies portray sharks in like a really scary light, like almost like they're killers. And sharks really are pretty docile. If they do take a bite of something, it's more so out of curiosity. They're kind of just like, oh, what is that? Does it taste good? Or you might have looked like a seal. But sharks don't automatically have this desire to go for humans. But you should be careful if you know that you're in an area where sharks tend to reside. And now I do have a few points on how to be shark smart and how to be safe. So one would be to not swim too far from shore. The deeper out you go, the more likely you are to be in like a shark nursery or just in what could be their feeding area. Now, there are exceptions to that, such as if there's like a lot of fish nearby, like up close to shore, then the sharks themselves might come up for feeding. Another would be to stay in groups. If you're in a big group, you're going to seem a lot more intimidating as opposed to one individual on their own. When you're swimming on your own, you're more likely to encounter a shark. Another would be to avoid being in the water during darkness or twilight. These are the times where sharks are very actively feeding, so your chances of potentially encountering a shark just increase because they're more active. Another would be to not go into the water if you're bleeding from a wound. You have to throw that in there. You just never know. So they have a really acute sense of smell. And so, when you're going in there, they're going to smell you and you're kind of just like calling them over in a sense. And another would be to leave shiny things at home. That one I honestly would have not thought of. So I wanted to include it on here because I don't know. I mean, like jewelry and stuff like that. Like I know a lot of people tend to take it off because you don't want to lose it. But another reason to take your jewelry off now is that you don't want to attract sharks. Sometimes when the sun hits the light, it kind of resembles fish scales. And so they're going to come up to you to kind of investigate, And another would be to avoid brightly colored swimwear. Sharks see contrast really well. So you don't really want to stick out when you're in the water. You want to blend in a little bit. And again, that one really surprised me because, I'm a fan of the nice summery colored swimsuits. So it's really interesting to know that sometimes we're doing things that might attract sharks. And I had no idea. And I do have a video. I'm going to pause it real quick just so I can load. But there have been a lot of shark sightings this summer. And this video that I am including was recorded at Davis Park, which is one of our sites at Fire Island. So I think this one was taken at the end of July, but a couple of times there have been massive schools of bunker nearby, and it just attracted the sharks because there's so many fish in the water. But I just wanted to include this because it is a aerial shot, like recorded through drone footage, and it's really, really, really neat to just see this happening. It does have sound, by the way, but it's not anyone speaking. It's kind of like background music. So if you don't have your volume on, it's okay. But, And so right now they're flying over Fire Island, and they're going to zoom in a little bit. You're going to see the shark itself swimming within the bunker. It's really neat. So those dark patches you see, those are all the bunker in the water. You can kind of see them splashing around a little bit. So it does go on for a while, but I did want to share where you could see this video if you wanted to share it with your friends. I found it off a local page called Fire Island and Beyond. And I'm honestly so grateful that they shared this video. Like, I saw this feeding frenzy in person through binoculars, and it's not the same as seeing it from an aerial drone view. So I'm very glad that they shared this just so that we could all see it. But if you wanted to like find this video on your own, I would just Google Fire Island Beyond Bunkers and Sharks Davis Park, because this video was taken at Davis Park. And this page also does share a lot of really cool pictures and videos of Fire Island in itself. So if that's something that you're really interested in, I would definitely check the page out. And I think it's 8 minutes long. Yeah, 8 minutes and 29 seconds. So I'm not going to play it the whole way through just so that, I don't bore anyone, but it's neat. And then they even have shark pictures from this same day, and I believe from last week as well. So if you wanted to just go check them out, they are available there for everyone to see. And then I did include a screenshot of their Instagram page as well, because I wasn't sure if the video was going to end up playing or not. So in this picture, you could see what you saw in the video with the shark swimming through and all the bunker kind of splitting off around it. But it's honestly so interesting to see so many sharks all at once, and to know that we have sharks in our local waters. And, it's important to raise awareness that they aren't necessarily here to hurt us. Like, there were sharks at the beach, but they were just looking for lunch, and they weren't really looking to cause us any harm. And it's a learning experience. I feel it's like a really cool moment too, to see nature in action. So I'm really glad that they shared this for everyone to see. And then they do also post like their pictures and videos on Instagram as well, if that's something that you would prefer over traditional Googling things. But that does bring me to the end of my PowerPoint. I wanted to leave some time for questions or comments, either about the PowerPoint or just anything about Fire Island, if anyone's interested.
Well, I'll say that was very interesting. I enjoyed that. And I do have a question, but before I say that, I will say if anyone wants to ask any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. Or if you'd rather type it into the chat, we'll monitor that and we'll get your question answered. But Roxana, I noticed in the beginning you said that the sharks, the mothers leave their babies almost right away. I may have missed if you said that if they travel together, but do these sharks are they solitary figures, or do they hang out by themselves, or do they join up with others and roam around?
Most shark species tend to be solitary, but I find, at least I have seen, I'm not really a shark expert, but I've noticed that the smaller sharks do tend to kind of like congregate together when it's feeding time, or if there's like a common interest. I don't think sharks do travel together. I believe most of them tend to be solitary, but I find that they have to find a mate at some point, so they're kind of like seek out another shark as well. But I also feel like they're a bit territorial in a sense, depending on the species, like the more aggressive species. And I do think most of them are solitary. I kind of wish I included this in the PowerPoint now, because I just thought of it. But there is a shark tracker through an organization called OCEARCH. I believe it is spelled OCEARCH. And they have a few tags, a few sharks that they have tagged. And the tags on them will kind of ping when they reach close to a radio transmitter. So they kind of have the travel patterns of these sharks like on a map somewhere. And I even think some of these sharks have Twitter pages. I know that sounds really silly, but that's part of trying to increase shark awareness is sometimes you make a Twitter page for your sharks that you're tracking. But if anyone is interested in learning a bit more about those, I think that's a really good organization to check out as well. And I believe they even work with Stony Brook University or have worked with some of their students on that project.
That's very cool.
I have a question.
Of course.
Have you ever heard of the sharks making their way into our bays?
Oh, I mean, I personally haven't, but I don't want to discredit it because I do feel like the bay in itself would be almost like a safer place in the open ocean. So I want to say there's a possibility of like younger sharks being in that area just because it's safer. And there's also like if the shark in itself is smaller, they'd have a better opportunity of finding food there because there would be juvenile fish and crabs in the area. And I haven't really ever found any like mermaids purses on the bay beaches now when I think about it, and most of them tend to be on the ocean beach. But I don't want to say it's 100% no, because it is a food source as well. I just don't think that's the area that they prefer. Similar to like whales, I think there was that like one whale several years ago that somehow ended up in the Great South Bay. And I don't remember what the whale's fate was, but it, not common, but still possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, no one else seems to have any more questions. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Before we go, I would like to tell you folks about our next program with our Fire Island National Seashore folks. We'll be joined again next month to review Fire Island as a whole. Our program is called Fire Island, your local national treasure. There are still things to do on Fire Island in the fall, and the Rangers will be telling us all about it. That program is on Wednesday, September 8th at 7 o'clock, and you can register through our website at communitylibrary.org or call us at the library at 631-399-1511, extension 240. And thank you so much, Roxana, for this very informative. It's so interesting what you showed us. I like the video too. But thank you again for joining us tonight. We'll see you again next month.
Of course, thank you for having me, everyone. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.